Audio Jungle. Good morning, Seattle, and welcome to our Throwback to the 90's segment here on the U.S. History Channel. I'm your host, Anamika Nanda, and today we'll kick things off with an exclusive interview where Rachel Stenner has a sit-down chat with one of Seattle's local residents. Take it away, Rachel.
Moments that you remember from the 90's.
Well, living here in Seattle, probably the biggest one would be when your dad and I were at the Kingdom, when it was still here, and watching Ken Griffey Jr. slide into home when the Mariners won the division championship in 1995. That was huge for us here in Seattle. We have a lot of spirit here, but we don't usually have the number one teams year after year, so that was huge for us, and I remember that being a really big deal here in Seattle.
So what were some of your favorite music groups during the 90's?
I'm always really bad at remembering names, but I would say Michael Jackson, Destiny's Child, Whitney Houston, and that was the 90's. So especially starting here in Seattle again was the huge grunge movement. So
Right.
Nirvana was huge, and one of the big hits during that time was Smells Like Teen Spirit, and that was really popular, and lots of people got into that. And U2 has been big for years, and that's been really popular around here. But I guess I just kind of stayed more with the other stuff.
Do you remember any songs from Whitney Houston or Michael Jackson that you liked in specific?
One that was really cool, and back then music videos also made a big impact on like the meanings of the songs. They really kind of brought them home, and Michael Jackson was always very expressive in his dance and in his music videos, and that one, Black and White, that was a really cool one, and I thought that was one of my songs that I really liked.
So still in media, what are some of the movies that you really enjoyed in the 90's?
One of my favorite movies was Forrest Gump with Tom Hanks. I mean, his movies always make a big impact on me, I think. But Forrest Gump was a really cool movie, and the idea of how they filmed it and going through so many different periods of time following his life was just super cool. And with him acting, it always makes it amazingly entertaining, too, at the same time. And then, of course, Titanic came out in the 90's, and that one was huge. And then Pulp Fiction was huge during that time, and that had a lot of really good music from before the 90's, but that was like one of the huge kind of cult classics that came out in the 90's, and that was pretty cool. Probably pretty inappropriate for most people to be watching, but it was good.
So in the 90's, there was a couple of scandals. So what was, in your opinion, the biggest scandal?
I would say probably the biggest one that was, both, it was political and not at the same time, but it was the whole Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton scandal, and that got just so huge, and it all started the ball rolling, that I can't even remember how long it lasted, but it was pretty much the only thing on the news for a while. And I remember, it just, they weren't talking about anything else, and it even ended up, with Clinton ending up being impeached, even though he wasn't removed from office. But that was a big deal.
The 90's were really the beginning of public access to the internet. So what do you remember most about it, and how did you feel about it at the time?
I remember when we first had it at home, and my husband would get on, and you could hear the crazy sound of the dial-up. And it was like that movie You've Got Mail, and it would be, you'd hear the little dialing sound, and it would say, "You've got mail." And it was really amazing, but I thought it was just annoying because it was just too much trouble at that point. And if you were on the internet, nobody could call you on the phone because it tied up the phone line at the same time. And so if you were trying to call somebody, all you got was a busy signal. And it probably meant that they weren't really on the phone. It meant that they were probably on the internet. I found that really annoying.
Thank you, Rachel, for that insightful interview. Up next, we have sports highlights from the 90s. Take it away, Camille.
Harding became the first American woman to land a triple axel, the most difficult jump in the skating competition at the U.S. Championships. She once again landed a triple axel at the 1991 World Championships, placing second in the competition. Completing triple axels in competitions are historically known to turn skaters into legends, which is why Harding's accomplishment was so monumental to her career. Unfortunately, she was involved in a controversial planned attack on Nancy Kerrigan, another well-known female skater during the 90s. In result, she was banned from skating for the U.S. Figure Skating Association. Even though her skating career ended in an unfortunate way, her accomplishments aided in giving young women confidence in pursuing careers in fields dominated by men. Michael Jordan was arguably the greatest basketball player during his time. During 1991 to 1993 and 1996 to 1998, Jordan won 6 NBA championships with the Chicago Bulls. He became an idol to young children and endorsed products such as Nike Air Jordans. Because of Jordan's excellence, news reporters and sports fanatics would constantly compare him to other basketball players. It was set in stone that he was the best basketball player when he was named the greatest American athlete of the century in 1999. Lance Armstrong was also the most well-known cyclist during the 1990s. He began his cycling career when he competed in triathlons at age 16. In 1993, he began to focus on cycling and had notable success in world championships. In 1996, he was diagnosed with cancer and took 2 years off for recovery. His career peaked when he won his first Tour de France in 1999, the second American to do so.
Thanks, Camille. Now we have Rachel to talk about the inventions that made the 90s.
The Game Boy was first released to the public July 31st, 1989 by Nintendo, but it blew up in the 90s and overtook the entire market of handheld gaming systems. The Game Boy and its successor, the Game Boy Color, sold 118 million units worldwide. In 1995, Nintendo of America announced that 46% of all Game Boy players were female, as opposed to 29% for the NES and 14% for the Super Nintendo. This has led to a larger number of girls playing video games than ever before. The MP Man was first made available to the public in March 1998 after being manufactured by the South Korean company Seihan Information Systems, and it was the first mass-produced MP3 player. While it was not received very well, this led to many other companies improving on their idea, and MP3s are very popular today. The Internet is a global system of interconnected computer networks, and it was created in the early 1960s. However, the World Wide Web was created in 1989 by Tim Berners-Lee, and it was first made available to the public August 1991 to allow them to have access to the information. AOL, or America Online, came on discs, and it was the main browser. Yahoo was the biggest search engine of the time. The Internet, the World Wide Web, America Online, and America Online have completely changed the way that people look at the world, as they put America on the path to having all the information known to man at the touch of a button. The Hubble telescope was launched into orbit on the Space Shuttle Discovery on April 24, 1998. It orbits at 547 kilometers or 340 miles above the Earth, moving about 5 miles per second. The Hubble telescope is used to take sharp pictures of objects in the sky, such as planets, stars, and galaxies, which is impossible from Earth because the atmosphere alters and blocks a lot of the light from space. Overall, it has allowed scientists to know more about the universe than ever before. Cell phones really became a part of everyday life in the 90s, as everyone was beginning to be able to call people while on the go. While they were expensive, the good economy allowed people to be able to buy these devices. This shift made people entirely change their view on the world, as they were suddenly able to connect with other people from wherever they were.
Crazy to think that the internet and smartphones were created in the 90s when so many of us grew up with these inventions. But next, we've got J-Lo covering the memorable songs of the 90s.
The song Waterfalls by the girl group TLC from 1994 embodied the entirety of R&B during this time, covering topics like illegal drug trade, promiscuity, and HIV/AIDS, while also topping the charts in a variety of countries. Waterfalls won multiple awards and is still remembered to this day. The release of this song also spread the message to not go and try and fix things when more important issues can be worked upon. The song Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, released in 1991, was the epitome of teen angst music. It accurately portrayed the darker portions of the teenage soul by singing about teenage freedom. Topping the charts in 1992, the gaining popularity of the song marked the rise of alternative rock and grunge into mainstream music. Considered the greatest hip-hop song of all time by Rolling Stones, along with other companies, the song Juicy by Notorious Big from 1994 was controversial in its making. The song covered the artist's rags to riches story and his upbringing surrounding drugs and poverty. With the emergence of this song, other rappers became influenced by his style of music.
Those are some great songs. Thanks, Jayla. Now we've got Rachel Wren covering the memorable movies from the 90s.
Jurassic Park was an adventure and sci-fi film released in 1993. Jurassic Park was a huge success in part because the special effects were computer generated, making the dinosaurs look extremely realistic. It brought in over $1 billion worldwide. Pulp Fiction was a film released in 1994 and it was a huge success and was considered the touchstone of cool. It made Tarantino, the director, a huge star, as well as many of the leading role actors such as John Travolta, Uma Thurman, Samuel L. Jackson, and Bruce Willis. It made the public more accepting of independent movies, but considered considerable backlash for being too violent or too vulgar. Toy Story was released in 1995 and was the first full-length computer-animated film. It helped kick off the then little-known company Pixar. The film was extremely popular among both kids and adults. It brought in $191 million in sales in the US alone. Titanic was a film released in 1997 and retold a dramatized and romanticized version of the historic 1912 Titanic sinking, featuring the young Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. It was the first movie to hit the $1 billion box office, making it one of the highest grossing films of all time. It also produced one of the most popular songs of the 90s, My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion. The Matrix was a film released in 1999 in response to the tech boom. It made the viewers question what they believe to be reality and how real the lives we live online are. It was extremely popular, pulling in $460 million in sales.
Some incredible movies came out in the 90s. And on that same medium, we've got Jackie with TV shows.
Friends came out in 1994 and it influenced style, such as the clothing they wore and like Rachel's iconic haircut. And Friends also influenced the TV shows of today. And then X-Files was another popular TV show and it came out in 1993. And it was released during a fascinational period of time where people would like wonder what was out there. And then you could like see that in their catchphrase or slogan, "The truth is out there," and it inspired a lot of sci-fi shows of today. Seinfeld came out in 1989, but it gained a lot of popularity in the 90s, and it changed modern comedy and the relationships between fans and the comedian. And it also gave recognition and appreciation to stand-up comedy. Now, The Simpsons, it came out also in 1989, but it gained popularity in the 90s. And it's still ongoing today, and it had an important role in the lovingly dysfunctional family that's prevalent in a lot of TV shows now. And also a lot of popular catchphrases came from Simpsons, and it helped make Fox Network popular and helped launch other popular TV shows.
Thanks, Jackie, for those great TV shows, and thanks to our viewers for tuning in on our Throwback to the 90s segment. Have a great day, Seattle!